Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. One of the side effects of the Trump tariffs is the interest in reducing interprovincial trade barriers right here in Canada. Here to discuss the issue with us is Crystal Witte-Vrangel. She is the Director of Research at the Montreal Economic Institute. Welcome back to Boom and Bust.
Thank you for having me today.
So, Crystal, I guess first, can you give our audience a little bit of an idea of the extent of interprovincial trade barriers in this country right now?
Absolutely. So, trade between provinces here in Canada has been an issue for many, many years. It's finally getting the attention that it deserves recently with all of the new discussion about it. But some estimates have quantified this to be up to $200 billion. And this comes in the form of multiple forms of interprovincial trade barriers. So there's really three different types that we talk about when we're talking about interprovincial trade.
Yeah, so maybe explain what is a trade barrier? How does that work?
Absolutely. So in 2017, the provinces signed on to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, which essentially said we're going to do free trade across this country except for these things that we specify. So that's the first type of trade barrier, is these codified barriers that are very explicit within the Canadian Free Trade Agreement themselves. And that's something like if you wanted to, as a Quebec citizen, order a bottle of wine from Ontario to be shipped to your house, that is not going to be possible for you because of those barriers. Then the second type of barrier is really the movement of workers. So the barriers to labor mobility that are seen with things like accreditation standards that differ between provinces, or the requirement for additional training before you're able to move and take up your trade. So you can expect that that's a bit difficult for folks when they're moving if they've got to undertake all these additional costs as well, simply to be able to work. And then the last type is really the most difficult ones to quantify and talk about, is the regulatory side, which these are in the thousands, and they're really the regulatory barriers that have been developed over time by each province. And so things like trucking, to be able to ship goods between provinces, there's different trucking regulations that companies have to adhere to be able to actually move their goods. And so this adds to the cost for the consumers and the producers, and really just tamps down what is possible if things could just freely move between provinces.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a number, $200 billion. Is that right?
Yeah, that's on the higher side. I believe the estimates range from about 100 billion to 200 billion, depending on the methodologies. But it's not a negligible amount.
No.
And even if provinces were to unilaterally remove their barriers, they would expect to see benefits, even if other provinces don't. So a smaller province like PEI, if they were to knock down about 10% of their import barriers, their GDP would be expected to increase by about 6%. So that's pretty significant, especially for a small province like that.
Right, and I think when you say 100 billion or 200 billion, it's not just money; it's also access to jobs, access to economic opportunity, is it not?
Exactly. And just access to a better range of goods and services that, we can only think about the services and the goods that aren't here because of these barriers. So, expanding access or being able to enjoy more as a consumer, there's definitely something to be said for that as well.
Yeah, and so this is been in the past kind of a consumer-driven thing. Where, people who are lobbying for reducing the trade barriers, they weren't thinking of it in terms of Donald Trump or what have you, but just as a way to benefit the consumer better.
Absolutely. And so, with the impending tariffs and all of the discussion with the tariffs from the external factors like the United States and that sort of thing, it's really brought these limelight to what can we do internally to enhance our resilience to these external things. So it's happening at higher levels now. Governments are finally really starting to pay attention to this issue.
Right, right. Crystal, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be back with you and with our audience after these commercial messages.